Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and lands outside of continuity in episode 418. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
Good.
You're going to want to hold on to that.
I'm glad it's out of continuity.
There are going to be other things coming up that are going to be outside of continuity, and so you're going to.
Oh, okay.
You want to hold on to that?
You're going to want to revisit that.
Everything's
I will
in
try to
continuity in a
remember.
certain way. Even Gary Russell has retconned the continuity that he said this was part of, so we're okay.
It's Doctor Who, where continuity doesn't matter.
Continuity's out the window. Good. I've been ill. That's why we're recording late this week. I wasn't necessarily ill. I just had a really bad migraine, but got some rest, got some drugs, and I'm good to go now. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Did you guys do anything fun?
My daughter had a musical over the weekend. Unfortunately, her Thursday night show got canceled because school got canceled.
Oh,
Fortunately, they let them go on Friday, even though they were out of school on Friday as well. She was in Pippin.
How was
High
it?
School's Pippin. It's pretty good. It's an interesting play. Musical. I had never seen or heard much about it. It's a good story. It's an unusual musical. It's got a neat twist on the end too.
That's one I have not seen.
I've not either.
Didn't see any movies this weekend though, or this week.
I bought a car.
Oh,
Yeah.
what'd you buy?
A 2018 Nissan Kicks.
Oh, Paul be darned.
Is it out in the driveway?
It is.
Well, we'll have to go get a tour.
It's got an orange
All right.
roof.
Let me hit pause. We'll just take the listeners with us. Come on, let's go.
It's really spacious.
It's got an
too.
orange roof, you said?
Yeah.
What's the rest of the car color?
Gray.
What?
Yeah.
Is
All
it-
of them have different colored roofs in the bodies. Almost all of them.
I'll have to see this.
A two-tone, huh?
Yeah.
Sean, did you do anything this week? Did you buy a car?
I did not buy a
Did you
car.
go see a musical?
I did not go
Did
see
you
a
see any
musical.
films?
Actually, I did see a musical.
You did?
Yeah. Lego Movie 2.
Is that a musical?
There's a musical number in it. Does that count?
No.
No.
Okay.
How was it?
It's good.
Not
It's-
as good as the first movie?
I don't think it's quite as good as the first one. But that might just be because, some of the novelty is kind of worn off at this point.
Is that actually Bruce Willis's voice?
Yes,
playing?
it is.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Spoilers.
Well, it's in the trailer.
Bruce has a cameo. No, it's good. It's very much worth seeing. You would, I think, very much appreciate it. It still has that same kind of sense of family, and it's giving you a lesson, and yet it's Lego, so the importance of using your imagination and that kind of stuff. It just once it gets over the hump of we showed you all this in the trailer for the setup, then it's like, okay, now it's getting good. But it took a little bit to get to that moment.
Did you watch anything, Keith?
We watched Venom.
What did you think of Venom?
I wasn't overly impressed.
Really?
I liked the third of it.
Which third?
The last
The
third.
last third.
Once Venom and Eddie kind of become actually symbiotic and work together as a team, it's a lot of fun. But it's just getting there is slow going. It felt a little rushed because they spent so much time setting everything up. Did you watch any other movies?
We went and saw Cold Pursuit.
I don't know that one.
That's the new Liam Neeson beats up everybody in January release movie. Every year there's a Liam Neeson beats up everybody in January movie. This is this year's model. It's also a comedy. It's kind of weird. It's not what you would think. It's very much not in the vein of Taken or any of those, whatever, 11 of them, however many we've got now of those kinds of movies. It's a dark comedy, and it's very kind of sarcastic and twisted humor. It's fun. I don't know that it's run out and go see. It's more of a rental, probably.
What's in the news, Keith?
Doctor Who won BAFTA Visionary Honors as the best TV show.
BAFTA Visionary Honors. Best TV show.
Yep.
So is this different from a BAFTA?
I'm not entirely sure what.
We are talking about the last season, right? Series 11?
Yes,
Yep.
for Series 11.
Yep. Why did they win?
It says Doctor Who was just one of several winners in categories celebrating diversity in film, TV, music, and public life. So I think it's celebrating the diversity of the show.
Gotcha. Well, good for them.
Yeah, it's a new initiative designed to recognize conservation and around this diversity. So I think that's good.
I think it's very good.
Any award you can throw at the show, the better. Unless it's a Razzie. In other news, Twitch has announced that from February 17th to February 22nd, you will be able to watch 12 adventures featuring the Daleks on Twitch. So previously the marathons did not include many Dalek stories. Now they have more.
Glenn, right up your alley.
Yeah.
We know where to find you.
From
Not
63's,
that I don't own all of the Daleks stories on DVD anyway. But.
Doesn't matter.
it goes from 63's The Daleks to 88's Remembrance of the Daleks.
Well, what'll happen is I'll sign in and be...
It's going to be the bridge.
The cabin.
The gap.
Yeah. Trying to get over the gap again.
It's also going to feature the 5 Doctors, which wasn't included previously.
Well, Daleks are in that too.
Yeah.
Or a Dalek, rather. for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
For us, the gap year has a whole different...
And finally, Candy Jar Books have announced the next Lethbridge Stewart novel in the Laughing Gnome series, book number 4, Rise of the Dominator.
Dominators are back.
Written by Robert Mamone.
But the Quark's going to be in it?
I'm not reading too much because I don't want spoilers. I want a fresh Dominator experience. London, 1973. Gangsters, Dominators, and the Brig.
Cool.
That's really all you need.
Hey, yeah, no doubt. Huh?
I'm in.
That's it on news.
All right. Well, shall we move on to feedback then?
Let's. Because we should respond to some comments that Jameson mentioned in his audio.
Let's do that before we read this week's feedback. Last week we neglected to answer. Jameson sent us audio feedback that we played in last week's show, and we got to the end of it and forgot to answer the questions that he had. Jamie had a question for what our favorite Dalek and Cyberman stories were. That's tough.
For Glenn, that's all of them.
Yeah.
For Daleks.
Well, I mean, there are some Dalek stories that I like less than others.
He really likes Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks.
That's one of my least favorites, but
And the Chasm.
I still don't hate it as much as
Episode 6 of the Daleks.
That one especially.
It's real easy to go to Genesis. I think that is one of my favorites. But I really think, as kind of cheesy as it gets sometimes, I think Destiny is one of my favorite. Destiny the Daleks, one of my favorite Dalek stories. And of course, Remembrance is always on the top.
I like Invasion of Earth a lot. That and, Genesis is, the staple. And Remembrance is really good too.
Genesis, Remembrance, of course, those are kind of, givens.
Oh, Dalek is another
yeah.
Aces one. It's
Asylum of the
good.
Daleks.
Not that Ace is in that. I'm just saying Aces is in. It's great.
Yeah.
I also have an affinity for Death to the Daleks. And it's horrible. It's complete bunk, and it's not a very good story. I don't care. It was one of those that I had the Target novelization of as a kid, and I read that story over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and was just enraptured by it. And then I saw the episode, so then all of a sudden it was the book come to life. So it just kind of has this, this kind of special meaning for me. But those for sure.
Any new series ones stand out to you guys?
Asylum.
Dalek, yeah.
Dalek and Asylum.
Asylum.
Victory of the No.
There's a lot about Victory I like. For Cybermen, I have a long list.
All of them.
Let's see, 10th Planet, The Moon Base, Tomb, Even Wheel in Space.
I like Tomb. Tomb's probably one of my favorite of the classics.
Tomb's a good go-to.
The Invasion.
Oh, yes, The Invasion, the other.
Invasion's probably my favorite. Of the new series, I like that one with Craig. What was the
Closing Time?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to put Big Finish in this in this list?
I think so, yeah. I think if I remember it right, it could be across all stories. It doesn't have to be just television.
Oh, well, then in that case.
Sort of
well,
Orion.
yeah, in that case, Spare Parts is
Yeah.
my all-time favorite Cyberman story.
Sort of Orion was pretty good.
Real Time.
Real Time is pretty good. I'll get to that. But
Yeah, we'll get there.
I may have tipped my hand there. The other thing he asked about is if we watched honest trailers. And yeah, I think we have from time to time. I don't religiously watch it, but if one catches my eye that I think will be funny, I will.
I check in every week to see if it's a movie I've seen, and if I've seen it, I'll watch it. Sometimes if it's a movie I'm interested in, I'll watch it.
I try to steer clear too because of ones that I haven't seen, because sometimes they're very spoiler ridden. So most of the time they're really spoiler ridden.
I kind of fall between the two of them. I think I check in way more than Glenn, but not nearly as much as Keith. But frequently it's another friend of mine that says, "Have you seen this yet?" and forces me to watch them. So,
all right, well, let's move on to this week's feedback then.
We have more feedback from Jamie. He says, "Hiya, Vortexers. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This will be a long one with my comments from episodes 54 through 58. Replies finally. Sean, you've gone Apple after all the grief you gave everyone? How dare you? Yes, after all the grief you gave people for jumping on the iPod bandwagon and calling them sheep, it makes you a traitor. I'm sorry, I can't stand Minuet in Hell, and I'll get more into that when you guys review it. On to comments. Just so you know, I download your podcast from your website and transfer the files to my non-Apple MP3 player. I don't get it through iTunes or Zune, and when my MP3's player's down, I use my Android phone and listen straight from the website. I watched Dreamland once. It was okay, but yes, the animation was meh, and the story wasn't phenomenal. The Next Doctor. I've seen it. Not recently. I enjoyed it. However, I think it's my least favorite of the specials. I think the closest Doctor Who has gotten to steampunk Cybermen is the audio story The Silver Turk, featuring the Eighth Doctor and Mary Shelley. It's very Frankenstein-esque. I enjoyed it when I listened to it a while back. Episode 55. In the news section, you mentioned the rumor of Sophia Myles as Amy and Rory's replacement. This ended up not being true, but in this discussion, you talk about that if true, she wouldn't be playing Madame de Pompadour because, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, Moffat would never have the Doctor swoop in at the moment of a companion's death to save them, only to put them back later.
How are we eating our words now?
May I direct your attention to Clara, Planet of the Dead. I don't know why, but I really like this one. It's just a fun romp. The bus people aren't annoying. I like Lady Christina. Captain Magambo was nice, reminded me a bit of Brigadier Bambera. Malcolm Taylor was a little bit of that quirky scientist who was fun to watch, and also the music for this one is excellent. My favorites are Lithuania and A Special Sort of Bus. It's just a light, fun episode. Waters of Mars. So I'm not much of a horror or scary movie fan. I tend to shy away from that stuff. And yet, the creepy episodes are some of my favorites. Blink, Midnight, and this. This is essentially a base under siege story popularized during the Troughton era. It's claustrophobic, it's tense, it's suspenseful. A good episode that's way up there in the top David Tennant episodes for me. I don't think you'll get any argument from us on that one.
Yeah, here.
Also, a complaint of Sean's is the desert planet. Apparently, since Star Wars, everybody's doing desert planets, and he went on to list franchises that had desert worlds. Well, he forgot one. Dune. How could
it's even in the title.
How could a geek nerd forget Dune? Admittedly, I've only read part of the first novel and haven't seen any film version. I've gathered over the course of 50-plus episodes that Glenn has issues with anthropomorphic aliens, saying it's just laziness on the part of costuming prop departments. Glenn, when does the act of explaining this laziness become more effort than just coming up with an original design?
It's true.
Episode 56, The Ice Warrior Archive. I enjoyed the Ice Warriors, but like the creatures themselves, it lumbered through a long 6 episodes. Seeds of Death was good. The Peloton stories were also good, although the first one was better. Haven't read the comic you discussed, though the Draconians also appear in the audio paper cuts with Six and Charlie. I found that the Series 7 episode Cold War was in essence a remake of the Ice Warriors. It has some differences, but essentially it's the story of a scientist finding a lone ice warrior in a block of ice. I'll discuss that one more when you guys get to it. I found, and it's been a while since I've watched them, but I found that I liked Seeds of Death better than the Ice Warriors. You talk about TMAT being down, causing a food shortage in 12 hours being somewhat unbelievable. However, what if in the future TMAT is owned by Amazon? And they have a monopoly on everything. People don't have the need for backup supplies when they can just have it ordered and sent directly to them. What pushes is probably that there's only one TMAT hub, and, well, they don't have a backup or a network of shipping hubs. Also, can TMAT be related to Kablam?
I was just thinking that.
Okay, headcanon.
Could be.
I'll buy that. I preferred Curse over Monster. Monster dragged on a bit, while I don't remember Curse doing the same.
We're talking Peloton now?
Back to now on to Peloton, I should say.
Okay.
There's an excellent novel that occurs during the Doctor and Joe's absence called Face of the Enemy. It features Unit encountering a mysterious event, and with the Doctor gone, they're forced to call on both the Master and Ian and Barbara for help. It also acts as a sequel to Inferno. It's a really good one and one of the better classic Doctor Who novels I've read.
Cool.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah.
Moving on for the end of time itself. Before I discuss the episodes themselves, let me just say that your discussions and theories on Matt Smith's departure are quite entertaining. Each series 7-episode, a multi-Doctor special?
Was that an idea thrown out?
Yeah, probably mine. I really liked End of Time. Tennant is one of my favorite Doctors. Sim is my second favorite Master. Wilf is great. Rassilon was great. I like seeing Gallifrey. This was, at the time, the closest we'd gotten to the Time War. Yes, I'll admit the long goodbye was boring and seemed to just drag on and on. Although, did anyone notice the music in the spacebar with Jack? Hint, Daleks in Manhattan. It's got issues, but the soundtrack is great, and it's all around just a fun episode for me. I loved Timothy Dalton as Rassilon. I wish we could get more of him in Big Finish because he has such a presence as an actor. You talk about how underneath the legend of Rassilon, underneath the awe and reverence that the Time Lords have for him, that underneath all essentially lies a tyrant. I think Big Finish saw that and ran with it. I tried Cyberman Bob and couldn't get into it. Sorry, Sean. No harm, no foul on that one. I couldn't get into it either. However, I read the short trips you'd written and enjoyed those. Therefore, I have a mission for you should you choose to accept it. I'd love for you to write a few pieces set in the Time War. If including the War Doctor, I'd recommend listening to the War Doctor audios first just to get a feel for his Doctor, since Day of the Doctor isn't enough and he's sharing the spotlight there anyway. I'm sure you could work up some great timey-wimey stuff that shows the sheer craziness of the Time War. I kind of sort of did the same thing with, what was the name of that one? For the Glory of Unicorns. If you haven't read that one, it's an 8th Doctor one that it's on the website somewhere. That's it's technically a Time War story, but it's kind of skirting the edges of it. I'll give it some thought. I don't have time presently because I'm hip deep in 20 other things and eyeball deep in some other stuff, but I will give it some thought, Jamie. You discussed the possibility of Rassilon creating the Weeping Angels out of exiled Time Lords. This is kind of fun because he's bringing up all this stuff, and I was like, I didn't remember talking about that. Cool. Did we really? I kind of remember that. It's like old home week. Keith also mentioned listening to Zagreus. I find it confusing and epic, but I don't mind it. I'm not in the I hate it side of this story. But what if the Weeping Angels are related to the Divergents that Rassilon locked away in the Divergent universe?
That's an interesting idea.
Now that you've seen the War Doctor, do you think he fits in well between 8 and 9?
Yes,
I think so.
Yeah,
I'm happy with the way that
Moffat
turned out.
worked some magic there, and it paid off.
I really can't wait for your coverage of Name of the Doctor, Night of the Doctor, and Day of the Doctor. In my last letter, I asked for your guys' favorite Dalek and Cyberman story. He then proceeds to give his, and I'm going to let I let Jamie know off I will let you guys know, listeners, on. I have censored a fairly large chunk of his feedback here due to spoilers. He goes into his favorite Daleks stories in particular are from some outside media, Big Finish and novels, and they're ones that are in the pipeline. And they were fairly spoiler heavy, and I didn't want to know, so I excised all of that. Not much to say with the Cybermen story. I think Spare Parts is my favorite. We get the origins of the Cybermen here, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't conflict at all with World Enough and Time. Spare Parts on Mondas, World on the colony ship. I figured the colony ship was sent out first, and when they lost contact with it, Mondas just went ahead with the Cybermen program just as the colony ship did when it got stuck. My other favorite is The Harvest.
That was a good one.
Dr. Ace, and one of my favorite Doctor companion pairings, it also introduces Hex. It has the Cybermen trying a new tactic, regaining their humanity. It's just an all-around good story that tries to do something different. And we thought so too. I think we all came down on the side of that one. I'm going to say it now. I'm weird. I'm one of those rare people who doesn't mind spoilers. I'll look at TARDIS Wiki or reviews before listening to a new Big Finish or watching the newest episode on TV. I'm weird in that way. I understand the people that don't like them, and so I do try to avoid spoiling them. If I spoil things for you guys in my feedback, it's not intentional, and I try to include warnings. How many Second Doctor Jamie story audios have you guys listened to? I was pleasantly surprised to discover how well Fraser Hines was able to mimic Troughton. Did you guys find that well done too?
Yes.
I think you'll find out listening what we thought of some of them. We haven't done a lot of them, but I think Keith and I have listened to a lot more outside of the show as well.
Yeah.
So I think I've given you enough to talk about this time. Enjoying your show. Listening to you read my feedback had me chuckling and a few times laughing out loud at your comments. Keep up the good work, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
We should also mention he actually gave us a little document that he wrote up, which is his review of the first 10 episodes of the Big Finish main range, Doctor Who main range, and you can find that on our website, travelingthrough.vortex.com, and we've posted the entire thing there, and you can read what he thought of those stories 1 through 10, and I hope you like them. I enjoyed reading through them, and we're hoping that he'll do more that we can include that way as well.
Yeah.
Got another piece of feedback this week, right?
Up next is Allie. Allie writes, "Hi from a UK listener. Good evening, gentlemen, or whatever time it happens to be when you read this. I thought I'd stop by to say hi and how much I enjoy the show. I've been a regular listener for just over a year now and found each episode to be fun, informative, and entertaining. It was interesting to hear your take on the latest series as it happened, your overall opinions, and what specifics you agreed and disagreed on. Beside the main series, I particularly like that you give equal attention to Who in all its media formats: TV, audio, books, fan films, and comics. As a child of the wilderness years, my love for the Doctor developed through the audio stories, and it's great to hear both old and new being discussed. Congratulations on the new venture with TARDIS Sauce, and as ever, looking forward to the next episode. Best wishes from across the pond, Allie."
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you, Allie.
Thanks, Allie. Good to hear from you.
Welcome to the family.
Yes.
That's it for feedback.
Cool. Well, let's move on to our review.
Real time. The Doctor is sent to the planet Kronos to find and bring back several survey mission teams that have vanished into thin air. Accompanied by his mature and loyal companion, Dr. Evelyn Smythe, and a third survey crew, the team are close to solving the mystery, when a member of their gang mysteriously disappears. The Doctor realizes these disappearances are far more serious than they thought. The Cybermen couldn't possibly be behind these strange goings-on, could they?
Bum, bum, bum.
Yes?
This took me a little bit to get into. I saw this actually for the first time about 5 or 6 years ago. I think we'd already definitely started doing this podcast. Now, it might have been even longer ago than that. And I watched, it had to have been longer ago than that because I watched it when it was still available on the BBC's website, BBCi. It wasn't BBCi anymore.
I think it was still available when we started this
podcast. Yeah. And I remember watching it on there, and I think actually it was even longer ago because it was when we did Shada, when we did the animated version of Shada. I watched this, and I watched Death Comes to Time. And then I think later we ended up doing Schalke Doctor, Scream of the Schalke. So I had caught this a long time, but couldn't remember exactly what it most of what until I knew I had Cybermen showing up, and I had Colin in the blue coat. We hadn't been introduced to Evelyn Smythe at the time, so it didn't even... In fact, it wasn't until I went back to it this time that I went, oh my gosh, it didn't even occur to me that that's who that was. But when I watched it the first time, when we started listening to Evelyn in the Big Finish audios. So that was kind of a revelation of, oh my gosh, yeah, that would have been Evelyn at the time. No idea who that was. I just thought it was some lady with him. This time watching it, so I got excited about it because I remember kind of liking it the first time I watched it. This time it took me a little bit to get into it because it kind of feels like you're dropped into the middle of the story. You're dropped into the middle of what's going on. And with the exception of that little setup of the lost communication from the previous team that had gone down to the planet, down to the planet, you don't know, there's not a lot of what's going on, but the story does a really good job of filling you in. And I think the really cool thing about it is it's a Cyberman story. And if you're new to Doctor Who and you haven't experienced a lot of Cybermen story. They do a nice job with Yiji's character. What was his name? Goodard. Really doing the nice little recap of the Cyberman story till now. And I thought it was really well done. Not
a
to
much
mention,
better way than Attack of the Cybermen did.
Right. But not to mention, and also when you're watching the video version of this, you see the really cool kind of montage images of the different styles of Cybermen, and as he's explaining it. So I thought that was really quite enjoyable, the way they did that. But it really feels like for the first several episodes that you don't quite know what's going on. It feels very confusing. And it's not until about the third episode that you really kind of start to put the pieces together. And I think it really picks up and gets good once you get into about the halfway, a little before the halfway point, right about the beginning of the third episode, I think is when it really gets exciting and going. But I think they tell a really, really great story. The revelation of Goddard.
I think Goddard is the best part of this story. Just the ideas behind him and how it's executed is just so well done.
And knowing that it's Yiji doing the voice.
I thought the voice sounded familiar, and I didn't realize it until you mentioned it, because I didn't go bother to look it up.
The Asian child.
The Asian child.
I thought he sounded familiar, and then I went, "Is that Yiji? That sounds like Yiji. I'll bet that's Yiji. It even kind of looks like Yiji." And then I went and looked it up. Yeah, it's Yiji. I confess to, I hadn't seen this before. This was my first time with it. And when I put it on the schedule, I thought it was something else. So,
what did you think it was? What would you think it was, one of the real-time productions?
Yes, I did. And so Glenn kept going on about, no, we're doing both the video and the audio presentation. And I kind of kept thinking in the back of my head, what audio? But, and I just wrote it off. And then I got into it, and it was like, there's the...
So you watched it first?
Sixth Doctor, and there's Evelyn. What am I... Oh! Yeah, it totally was not what I was expecting. Which is, and I'm sure you told me that. I'm sure at one point in time we discussed real time, and you told me it's not part of that.
I think back when we watched Shada, and we talked about the 4 different webisodes that they did. Because just a little background into this for not just you guys, but the listeners is, and I think we talked about this before, and you're probably familiar enough, but back before Doctor Who came back to our television screens, the BBC toyed with the idea of this is how they were going to bring Doctor Who back to the fold, basically. They were going to use the internet, which was still, the entertainment media on the internet. This is early, maybe even pre-YouTube days.
This was 2002.
Yeah, this is where they were going with it. This is where they were going to do their relaunch Doctor Who on the internet. And they did Death Comes to Time, which was the 7th Doctor story. It was the first one they started with. And I think it's a much shorter story, but it did really well, and people loved it. People were flocking to BBCi, which they were really trying to get into the internet game. And so they, knowing that Big Finish had already been doing audio, contracted with Big Finish, brought them on board and said, "Hey, will you do this for us? Help us do this. We'll put the visuals together. We'll sync the audio, and we'll do it this way." And they did, and they loved it, and they thought it was a great idea. And Big Finish was on board and thinking this was going to be the next thing. In fact, that's part of the reason why this particular story ends the way it does, because I think Gary Russell thought he was going to eventually revisit this story and do a sequel. Unfortunately, things happened where they had a falling out with BBCi, and Big Finish and BBCi kind of severed their relationship with them. Part of that also had come by the fact that the follow-up for BBCi was Shada, which I think they ended up using BBC for, or no, they used Big Finish for it, but there was some rockiness there. And then when Scream of the Shalka came along, that project came along, they went outside of Big Finish, and I think that was the nail in the coffin for that partnership. And so ultimately, and then we know where it went from there. A certain man named Russell T. Davis decided to put a bug in the ear of the controllers at BBC Television and managed to bring it back. And so that kind of killed this little project that had started to blossom on the internet. So, yeah, that's what this is. That's from that little era of Doctor Who. At the end of the Wilderness years, towards the end of the Wilderness years.
It took me a minute to figure that out. And once it did, then it all that came rushing back, and I went, "Oh, this is part of the okay, yeah, I know what I'm watching now," but I still hadn't seen it before, so I was very much just along for the ride. And I agree with you. I think it's a little slow to get going, and yes, you're dropped off in the middle of it. But the part of that I think is kind of the gimmicky charm of doing events in real time. Yeah. That the whole story is set over the events of an hour.
It isn't necessarily.
Well, mostly.
That's what they were shooting for. Yeah.
It really drops you in the deep end initially because you're in this experience of, okay, the doctor's going back to fix it. We'll see. And not realizing it's not talking about the doctor. It's talking about Goddard until you go back and rewatch it. And that little prologue really dumps you into the deep end, and then it gets to the rest of the story, I thought.
Explain. I'm not sure what I'm following.
You remember the prologue where it's, he's hooked up to the thing and going forward or whatever. The two guys talking. Am I imagining this?
Nope.
The prologue.
Yeah, I know what the prologue was.
Yeah, that's not the doctor.
That's not Dr.
Oh, that's Goddard going. Yes, okay, I got you. Yeah,
I didn't get that.
you.
Obviously, you're led to believe it's the actual doctor.
Right, I got you.
Dr. Goddard.
Right, okay. Yeah, I didn't think it was the doctor, so I guess maybe because I had watched this years ago and knew the story.
Did you think it was the doctor?
I thought it was the doctor.
That's why I was confused. I was like, the doctor never...
No, they call him the doctor. Yeah. So we're led to...
Right.
You're supposed to believe
Sorry,
it's the doctor.
I didn't get that.
With any story... Oh, the doctor is... Okay, I know who we are. Yeah, right. Oh, it's set in a hospital.
Yeah.
You know.
Until they quantify it, I assume the doctor is the definite article.
I'm on board now.
Same.
But I enjoyed the ride.
And it's got so many of those little things that could have gone wrong. It's like, we've got a survey team, and we're in the desert, and we're, okay, there's a time
Another
portal.
Desert planet, Sean.
And I mean, there's just so many things that could have gone wonky, and don't. It's a tight script. It goes right where it needs to and gets moving, and some of the wonderful things that this story does, and it's obviously forward active now, but I don't know if anybody else feels this way. The visuals, while, it's really, really, really a stretch to call it animated.
It's a motion comic.
It's a motion comic more than anything. And that, obviously, at the time that it came out, is just the limitations of the internet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And how you were able to watch it. But the fact that the Cybermen were not able to do full conversions, and so it was a very patchwork job, and these people showed up. First of all, it's probably the most horrific cyber conversion in the history of Cyberman stories. I think this was the goriest. Maybe it's not quite the right word, but the
it's
traumatic. Gruesome.
Yeah.
Not only the process, which we get a kind of a detailed look at, as opposed to just sound effects in the TV show. This is really here comes the claw, here comes the, and oh, look, there's blood. And I mean, it's kind of all in there. And it's like, yeah, this is really intense. And I'm kind of glad for that, because it brings back the body horror elements of what Cybermen stories I think have been missing for a while.
Yeah.
That is part of what makes Cybermen terrifying. But the other thing is that because it's such a patchwork job, and the way that these were drawn, it retconned so much of Cyberwoman.
Yeah.
I
thought of it this time too.
Fixed so much of that episode for me that it was just like, same thing. Okay. Yeah.
It wasn't quite a full conversion. So
all right.
Makes sense now.
It's not just Torchwood being, ooh.
I don't remember if it had it on the copies that we had, but the original version actually had a warning to parents. I think it was episodes 3 and 4 had a thing on the front that warned that some scenes not suitable for young children on these. I personally think that they overstepped a bit, in my opinion. I don't think it needed to be as gruesome visually as it was.
You're probably right.
I think audially, I think it worked well enough, and it especially, and maybe it's because I watched the video version before I listened to the CD, but the visual wise, I think you still could have got the impact that needed to be delivered there from just the audio of it happening in a couple of clever scenes. I didn't have a problem with like the random body parts in the background. I think that visually enough established the fact that this was a very patchwork facility that was being used. But I think the very graphic nature of, I think it was the administrator's conversion, or no, it was the not him, that was another guy earlier on, and the crushing of the one man's head. Although we luckily don't see that. It just goes to a full red screen, which I appreciated that. But just the blood on the clothes, I think that the graphicness maybe pushed the envelope a little too far for me. But it's okay. I'm not putting them down for it. I just think it was a little much.
Mary Whitehouse would have had issues with this,
especially for Doctor Who. Maybe I'm channeling her a bit here, but overall, I agree with the statement of how I think that it needed to be. This does take it to a level that the horror of what conversion could be. So I agree with you that, but I just think they could have stepped back the visuals a bit.
Yeah, it's just, it's very easy to kind of think that, there's people in the suits. And you think of it as a suit, especially a new series Who with the stomping around that it's a clamshell mechanical. It's
an
not.
Iron Man suit.
It's not an Iron Man suit. It's
right.
very much a different thing that's happening here. That to me is kind of what's always, and I think that's what Kit Pedler was going for when cybernetics first became a thing back in the 60s. That's where the scare factor was for him, that people would be willing to. Oh, you've got a bionic eye. What do that kind of thing. So that to me is kind of where the Cybermen have always been scary, and this sure brought it home. Followed by that ending.
Makes me glad this isn't true continuity.
Wow. Ill-prepared. Was... Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the first time I watched this, a part of me felt that it was going to be Goddard in the cyber suit.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about it is watching it again, I had forgotten who was in there. I had completely forgotten from the first time I'd watched it years ago. And so I was like, I can't remember who this is. It'll be a big reveal. So then when the big reveal happens again, I go, oh, that's right. Wow. And it's much more impactful now knowing Evelyn the way I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was that huge moment of, wow. And then I went back and listened to the CD, and boy, does it put the frame of her having the conversation with the controller about trying to, who are you reaching in there? It makes it even more impactful on the second listening that she's talking to her cyber converted self.
Yeah.
She's trying to reach in there and get that person to resurface without knowing that it's her in that cybernetic outfit. And I thought, wow, how it just, the second time through was like, whoa, this is just too surreal and creepy.
It really, and a good portion of that is Gary Russell's writing, but a good chunk of it is Maggie's performance. She's always good as Evelyn. That's I think why we all fall down on loving Evelyn so much as a companion. But in this one in particular, that moment just really is a standout among standouts.
Yeah, it really is.
And Collins, he's great. He's always great. And Yiji was great.
Did you guys notice the cat brooch?
What was up with the cat brooch?
So I did some looking into this because they would show the cat brooch frequently. Did you notice the cat brooch would react to certain things? I didn't know this until I went and did some research. Apparently, it was floated at one time that when they were choosing that brooch costume, he wore several different brooches that they went through. But the idea was to have the cat brooch actually react as the Doctor reacted to things. That was an idea as far back as the 1980s when Colin was on television.
Really?
That was a concept. And so this was a slight nod to that. Gary Russell apparently, or maybe it wasn't even Gary's decision to do that, although I think he did direct this, so he had something to do with the animation. But somebody's decision was to make a slight nod to that original concept by doing that. And that's why they keep cutting to the brooch, and the brooch actually reacts to things. So I
had
that was
no idea that was a thing.
Yeah, I didn't either until I was doing some research.
I was just going to write it off that it was Frobisher.
Another thing that I looked at that, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but in the Cat's Cradle series of the Virgin New Adventures books that I've about 11 books into now. There is a, without giving too much away, there is a mysterious silver feline that keeps roaming around, and you kind of learn what its purpose is. It's very, they don't really go very far with it or go much into it, but it seems like they had set up something that they didn't really do much with. But there is it becomes the thread through that arc, and something in those books have always alluded to me that was more connected to the Doctor than the way they make it connected in the story. And somewhere in my head had imagined that maybe that was that this silver feline had always been there, and it was actually at first been the brooch that Colin had wore. But so when I saw the cat reacting, that's where the cat brooch reacting. That's where my head went was, oh, they explored that more than what they alluded to in the books. And then when I started reading that, no, it was simply an undone idea. It's like, oh, I kind of deflated my my expectations of that.
So, okay, so we leave off on this cliffhanger that, Evelyn's infected with this retrovirus that's going to go back and wipe out all of Earth and cyber convert the entire planet.
Which is such a cool idea.
And
the fact that they turn it on its head, that, the time loop of that entire thing of the Cybermen don't get the virus until he brings it to them from the past, the bootstrap paradox that they
which did anybody
there.
else,
grandfather paradox as they refer to it in this one.
Did anybody else, as soon as what have you got there and he explains what it is, did anybody else go, oh, you're the one that brought it, man? Did anybody else just latch onto that immediately? But,
except for I kept wondering, well, when is the Doctor going to deliver it? Because he's adamant about they don't know when or where, or they know when, but they don't know how the Doctor delivers it. But he knows that the Doctor is going to be a part of it. And at the point that I was the same way. I was like, well, yeah, you're the one that started this, and it wasn't until the second time around that I realized what the cyber controller is doing, and he reactivates her cybernetic chamber after he's stopped the process. He ends up starting the process again. He says, reactivate that chamber. And I remember seeing that when I was doing the audio, hearing that here. And I thought, oh, well, the Doctor's not going to be able to save her in time. But the Doctor gets in there and he does. But it's the second time that I realized that she almost had started going under the process. But she wasn't necessarily going through the process again. She was just being injected with this virus.
Process.
Yeah, it was a different process.
Yeah.
And so that was the helpful thing about listening to this on the heels of watching it, is I caught a lot of these little things that were going on. And it wasn't until the big revelation to me, other than Goddard being a Cyberman, and also the fact that the really cool effect that the Doctor figures out that none of the Cybermen can see.
Yeah.
That was neat. And picking up on the little clues that the Doctor picked up on the second time was neat to listen to that again. But to me, the big reveal isn't necessarily even the fact that Evelyn is the cyber controller. It is the fact that you go, it's not until they're on the TARDIS and they're going to, and she decides she wants to go to 1939 when...
27.
Or, yeah, I'm sorry. 1927 when Lucky Lindbergh flies the Atlantic, that I thought the Doctor did deliver the virus. And it's just those little nuggets and that one big one there at the end is like, oh, wow, he was right. Goddard was right all along.
Because when Goddard's giving his thing about, I was born in 1927 and this, and, and he's kind of giving you this whole backstory, and you're like, oh, it's a little much, but okay. I don't know why we need to know all this, but okay, you do your thing. Wow, this is a pretty tragic backstory you've got, man. And then Evelyn, yeah, I'd like to go see this. All right, here we go. Earth, 1927. No. Oh. So where do we fall down on? Obviously there can't be a sequel now because we've lost Evelyn. So we've lost Maggie.
Yeah.
There is no chance of doing another story, at least in this format, and continuing the story on. Now I know that Gary Russell's kind of sort of.
Well, there's so much talk about divergent universes and different timelines that I'm okay with. In my head, even though the cyber controller was talking about reactivating the chamber, in order to get it to work, I have to believe that the virus did not take to Maggie or to Evelyn, and that Goddard was wrong that they didn't actually infect her, and they're just going off to have a good adventure.
Well, I think it unravels the entire paradox idea, though. That how did it start?
Well,
This has to
yeah,
be the
that's a good
cause and
question.
effect. But to me, and
it's
that's
it's
a
trying
good
to break the paradox. Is
that's
what
a
I'm
good
trying
way.
to do.
Yeah, but I think the problem is you have to have a paradox breaking moment, and they don't illustrate that well
Yeah.
enoff. They
I just
they
want
show you
Evelyn to be
they
okay.
show you that and that's a good way to headcanon retcon it. I think. Ultimately, I think what you have to come down on is you talked about divergent areas and things like that. Is Gary Russell, after the falling out with BBCi, he decided, well, we're not going to make this continuity. This doesn't count. We'll just, and he actually lobbied for Big Finish to say, no, this doesn't count the thing. Ultimately, later though, he alludes to it and Spiral Scratch, which I haven't read yet, but from what I understand is he alludes to it well enough to kind of give maybe a finalized continuity answer to the mystery of what happened here, and it sounds like it's an alternate timeline Doctor and Maggie Evelyn that because they were already a part of this paradox, were already in an alternate or divergent universe from our own timeline, from at least the Doctor and Evelyn that we know timeline.
Which makes
and
sense.
I think that's probably the simplest way to fix it, is to say, yes, these are a series of events that happened outside of this time. The books have done that in the past with several things. We've done that with Shaka Doctor, where we've sort of explained away.
Some of us are still waiting for that.
We haven't watched Death Comes to Time, but it's my understanding that there's another nugget in there from what I've read that really can't jive with. It's because they were going a new direction with Doctor Who that ultimately they could end up going a new direction with, because things kind of fell apart and thanks to the show coming back, which I'm not knocking that. I'm glad the show came back to television, but it'd be interesting to see where they were able to go with these different lines that they were setting up for the web universe, basically. So,
well, and because it's such a time loop in everything, you can kind of rationalize in your head that they entered this divergent universe, and another Doctor and Evelyn continued on, and this Doctor is kept in a loop continuously.
it's sort of that what was it, Flip Flop, that
Yeah.
had that idea of an alternate Doctor and Mel in a different timeline. I think you can go there with that, because they have. I think that was probably after this.
Yeah.
But they have established a precedent for it.
Yeah.
So I think that you can explain it away that way. There's a lot of Doctor Who, though, that you can explain away that way. The early comics, you can explain away, inconsistencies.
That's just the easiest explanation. It's a
It
different
certainly
universe.
is. Sometimes it feels like a cheat and a
Okay,
cop-out.
but what about those of us that want it to be canon? How do we fix it?
Well, I think you can still canonize it by including that. I think that's how you do canonize it.
That's how it is canon.
I think unless somebody directly writes the sequel, or in a story down the line that we listen to, somebody makes at least a direct connection to it, it can't be pure canon, because
you can't just assume that the second part happened.
Right.
That there was a whole adventure.
Right.
And they broke the time loop.
Paradox,
They broke the paradox, and then went on to arrangements for war, whatever the next Evelyn adventure would have been. You can't make that work without somebody actually writing it down.
I think you can,
because in my head it happened that way.
You can.
That's how your headcanon works. Ours is mine is it's a separate, different universe. Yours is they fixed it.
They have to fix
maybe
it. They have to fix it.
You're right. Maggie Stables has passed, and there's no way to do it now. But I think that until it is done, it's broken to this point.
Okay.
And without stretching the boundaries and saying alternate universe, or
because I can't accept that she doesn't. Yeah, I can't accept that they don't fix it. Even in a divergent timeline.
But I think it
Because it still has to be fixed.
I think
it still has to be
I
fixed.
agree with you. I'm along those same lines because I'm the guy that wants everything in Doctor Who we can. But I agree with you to that point. And I also accept the fact that they went back, they watched Lindbergh take off, and then they went on to Arrangements of War or whatever came next in the line here. And that still progressed that way. I also think I can accept the fact that maybe there is an off-story adventure where the Doctor resolves this problem. He doesn't obviously he doesn't know. We aren't let on that he knows that they left. He didn't hear Goddard trying to warn him that she was the one in the suit, and so ultimately he'll have to find out that that's the case because we know that Maggie's story goes on. At least to a certain point, we're not finished with her story, but without that happening. So I suppose maybe someday somebody might. Maybe Gary Russell will pick up and write a Titan comic that ties into real time and fixes that.
There you go.
There you go.
That's the Sixth Doctor story they need to do.
Here's what happens: is they take off and they're headed to go to Earth, and the 12th Doctor shows up. He lands his TARDIS inside the other TARDIS, and at the last minute, he snatches Evelyn from her timeline and saves her from dying, and then puts her back later at an appropriate point. So there's no virus.
There you go. Fixed.
He Moffats it.
He creates another paradox.
Hey, fight fire with fire.
What else on this? It's a really good story. The difference in the CD isn't much. I was really kind of surprised because it was the first time I'd listened to the audio. I read that there are 2 inserts that add to it. The beginning in the TARDIS when they're discussing the coat, which I think was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And as we now know, this is the story that introduced the blue coat, the blue suit rather. And now we learned that it's his morning suit because they had just come from a funeral.
And so Sixth and Evelyn.
Yeah, absolutely.
That whole discussion
Absolutely.
is like this wouldn't have worked with any other Doctor.
No, I agree.
Companion
not
pairing.
at all.
And it's funny that the reason for the blue suit is the fact that the limitations of creating a webcomic, basically. When they didn't want to do all the different colors, so it's just simpler to paint a blue suit. But to have that set up with that, her actually allude to that because I think this came out in August 2000. Would you say 2002?
2002.
And the CD came out just a few months later in December. So they didn't have to explain, but they did. And so I think that was well done. The other thing escapes me. I did not notice another place that was different from the video. It was just that TARDIS, but from reading the wiki on it from fandom, there is apparently one more insert in there, but I wouldn't have been able to pinpoint.
I think it's a little bit more on the planet.
With the survey teams.
Yeah,
and...
I think it's a little more exposition.
It
type
seemed
stuff
like there may have been a little bit more of the crew inside the temple with the Doctor prior to Goddard explaining the backstory of the Cybermen. It seemed like there was a little longer gap in there, but I couldn't identify what dialogue would have been there. So maybe that's where it's at.
That could be.
Yeah, there wasn't much difference.
Anyway, well done, and it just it's a what could have been, I think, for Doctor Who, and it's neat to explore that, and to see some of the lead up out of the wilderness years for Doctor Who to make a return, even if it hadn't made it back to television. At least they were looking at other avenues to tell new stories, and I think that the BBC was wise to go that way. I think they ultimately made a better choice by bringing it back to television, but.
Makes me look forward to seeing Death Comes to Time, too.
Yeah, because that'll be the last of the web stories that we have not tackled, which is funny. We're doing them backwards. Although I think we did Shada first, then Shulka.
I'm pretty sure
I think we did. I think we
did we
did
do
Shulka
Shulka first? Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I
are
think
doing
we
it
are
backwards.
going
So
completely
Shulka
order.
and then Shada and then, reverse order. Well, it wouldn't be Traveling Vortex.
Seems about right.
Sean, what do we got coming up on the schedule?
Well, we're going to do some more Big Finish next week. The schedule is posted, by the way, for those of you that like to follow along and do homework, as it were.
And the episodes are right this time.
And the episodes are right this time. Thank you, Jamie, for pointing out my mistakes there. Where is it?
I'm glad somebody else can do it for a while.
Yeah, somebody has
It
to.
doesn't have to be me all the time.
We've got a couple of Big Finish Companion Chronicles next week. 5.5 or Series 5.5, A Town Called Fortune. So we get a little bit more Evelyn. And 5.7, Perry and the Piscon Paradox. So we will talk about both of those next week. And then,
Jamie, before you ask why we're skipping that, there are reasons. We can't say. There are reasons.
There's a method to the mayhem. And then some more alternate Who the following week, as we're going to do some more Torchwood. We're going to do the Titan Comics Torchwood Volume 2, along with Big Finish Torchwood Fall to Earth.
Cool.
More on that as we get there.
Yay!
Well, don't forget to support us on Patreon if you can. We appreciate those of you that already are. Is there anything else we need to touch on this week before we close it?
I don't think so.
All right. That's going to do it for this time. Until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you. Thanks for listening.
What he said.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.